for any of these cults, why would God be afraid of Google.com or a large language model or Reddit? My group's actually scared of Reddit, which I think is hilarious. And it's like you're telling me that the God of the heavens and the earth can't handle some nerd from Seattle and some other people from all over the world posting a few things on a subreddit? Really?
It's a critical component to mind control. Being made over to be clones of the person who's at the top of the pyramid. Interested in the subject because of my own cult involvement. I was recruited in 1974 into a front group of the Moonies.
Welcome to Cults, Culture, and Coercion, where we discuss the world of high control groups, manipulation, authoritarianism, and helping you make sense of the world around us. I'm your host, Dr. Steve Hassan. Please like, subscribe, and share this video and my work with all your friends and networks, because we want to build a community that supports freedom of mind. I'm so happy to introduce Chris Vishoot, a former 3.5-year member of Shincheonji, a Korean cult that follows Man Hee. They were the superspreader for the COVID virus and had a number of issues with the law in Korea. Like my former cult, the Moonies, they are extremely deceptive. People are often unaware of its real teachings, the real history of this destructive cult. Chris has been very active as a Christian to deconstruct the ideology of this cult and expose the real history and dark side. Chris was helped by reading my book, Combating Cult Mind Control, and is very interested in being trained by me to learn how to help more people by implementing the strategic interactive approach which I've developed. He was raised in a Christian dispensationalist family, and so is primed to get involved with this cult. Chris, you remind me of the younger me when I got out of the Moonies, and I was like, how dare they do this to me and my family and my friends, traumatize us, and you're a fireball. So please, I want you to tell people, where did you grow up? Tell us about your family, and then let's get into how you were deceptively recruited, what happened in there, and what you've been doing since. Thanks.
Yeah, so my name is Chris. Thank you for the great introduction. I was raised in a family that had a heavy emphasis on the world ending basically tomorrow. And so after leaving the Korean doomsday cult Shincheonji, one of my close friends, she actually said this to me in a phone call. Hey, Chris, I watched one of your interviews. Weren't you also kind of raised in a similar background? My friend, she actually came out from an abusive relationship, and she gave me the power wheel of psychology. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is a great way to articulate what I went through psychologically. I was in an abusive religious organization. Mm-hmm. Because when I'm explaining to the average person, hey, I was in a cult, they kind of give me a weird look. When I say, and instead they're like, hey, I was in an abusive religion. Oh, I get it now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just to put a name on it, you grew up in a doomsday type scenario. The world's coming to an end any minute, and we need to, operate on that basis. And so tell us, how old were you when you were recruited into Shincheonji? What happened? I know when we've talked previously, you said, I lost a lot of weight. I wasn't sleeping, Steve. Tell us more.
Yeah. So for more general context, I just graduated college, 2 engineering degrees, went to University of Washington, go Huskies. And I was working full time, and I kind of thought to myself, okay, is this it to life? At the time, I actually was more agnostic atheist. And as I continued, I had 2 friends pass away. So that really primed me for the idea of there has to be something more to life than just work. So a few years into adulthood, I was around 25. I met a girl on a dating app. And we became boyfriend, girlfriend. We dated for a few months. And she introduced me to what appeared to be a innocent Bible study. What's the worst that can happen? It started once a week in a coffee shop for about an hour to an unmarked building twice a week and for about 3 hours. For me, I was very interested in the Bible, even though at the time I was more agnostic atheist. I wanted to go back to Christianity, but I wanted to have more deeper theology because I'm a nerd. You know, I love going into granular detail about things. So this Bible study at first, something felt off. I remember asking my girlfriend at the time, hey, why are we meeting at an unmarked building? And what's the name of this group? She gave me a now well-known friend group name named Word and Life Theology School. I was like, okay. I tried Googling it. Can't really find anything about it. Later on, they made a website. It sounds very Christian. Yeah, we believe in the Trinity, or God is holy, you know, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, things like that. Just a spoiler alert, they don't believe in the Trinity, and they believe that Christians are married to Satan and that their pastors are drunk with maddening wine. Minor detail.
Minor detail. But that's great to peel it back. So just to be clear, you were on a dating app, you were interested in the woman, and she was already a member, right? She wasn't just dating and she got recruited. She was deliberately fishing for new blood to bring in. Mm-hmm.
To make matters worse, so this Bible study is about a year long, twice a week, 3 hours a session, did 3 times a week, sometimes 3 hours per session.
Right.
They slowly warm you up so that more and more of your time's committed within this year span. And halfway through this class, my girlfriend and I broke up. So about 6 months in. And so she steps down from the class. 6 months later, in October of 2019, I graduate or pass over into this group. They reveal the name Shincheonji New Heavens, New Earth. And then it turns out that half the people in this class are current members pretending to be new members so that they can spy and report on the recruits. To make matters worse, that was the moment that I realized that my now ex-girlfriend was a part of this cult, let's call it what it is, the entire time, reporting on me. And when looking back, I do remember I would tell my then girlfriend or ex certain things, and then other people would kind of make comments about it. And I was like, that's really weird.
Yep. That's straight out of the Mooney playbook from the 70s, by the way, with people pretending to be newbies, but they're actually members and spying on each other. And just, it was months before I learned that they thought Moon was the Messiah.
You know, it's interesting. When looking at the history of Shincheonji, it turns out that our cults have a very similar DNA structure, which we can get to later on.
Well, just mention a few things, because I think you had told me there were a couple of ex-Moonies that were involved with Shincheonji or something.
Yeah. So for jumping ahead, so Shincheonji, they claim they started in 1984. Their real starting date's in 1980, but we can get to that later. And it turns out that one of their first books, called Shintan, Birth of a God, was written by 2 former Unification or Moonies members. Mm-hmm. And so it turns out that we actually have a lot of overlapping theology. What Shincheonji calls wisdom of hiding, there's heavenly deception where they justify that it's okay to lie.
Right.
John the Baptist, he betrayed and did not fulfill his role or duty. Jesus was a sinless man, but really we need during his second advent, which he returns in spirit through another spirit working through flesh, you know, with Moon or Man Hee, there needs to be a completion of salvation that the second advent needs to carry out. Now, Shincheonji doesn't call Man Hee the second coming Christ. They call him the promised pastor of the New Testament, but effectively, God and Jesus are working exclusively through him. And so even though he's a man who can make mistakes, whatever he says goes. Sound familiar?
Right. Right. So exactly. So, and this group there are articles from around the world where this group has deceived people into it, and people have dropped out of college, cut off from family members and friends, donated large amounts of money, and they're put to work recruiting more people, right?
Absolutely. One thing I like to point out too, they got banned in Singapore because they registered as a software consulting company. And then according to the Singapore Times, that's one of the primary reasons why they got banned. And this is all uncovered during COVID because the Singaporean government, they're like, listen, we don't care what you believe. You just got to be honest and register with the government.
Right.
So it kind of shows the level of deception that I've seen, that I've witnessed, and I've been through. And there's so many news reports from all over the world, Australia, New Zealand, North America, countries in North America, all over Europe and Africa. I always like to say that whenever there's smoke, there's fire.
Yeah, indeed. I like to say the same thing. And I've introduced you, or you already knew Chris Lee, former member of the Boston Church of Christ, International Churches of Christ. And that was a group I worked with from 1980 or so, because they started here in the New England area. And they were renowned for going into mainline Church of Christ and recruiting deceptively and actually splitting congregations. And Shincheonji likes that formula.
Absolutely. One of the more well-known cases in the West. In Texas, I got in touch with Pastor Rusty from Austin, Texas. He had his church infiltrated for a year. So the Shincheonji member for a year pretended to be a Christian. Now remember, they view pastors as if they're married to Satan and the Christians are drunk with maddening wine. But they'll introduce themselves as a Christian organization sometimes.
Right.
So this person won over the women's department leader of the church, the elder or deaconess or whatever. Then this same person tried to recruit the rest of the elders. But because of the overlap between Shincheonji and the Jehovah's Witnesses, faithful and wise servant, the precipice of Armageddon, etc., one of the elders caught on and warned the pastor Rusty what was going on. And he had a great interview about this as well. And this is actually happening all over the United States. I just talked to a pastor in Atlanta, Georgia, who also had his church infiltrated.
So you have put up some websites, correct? Why don't you name it? We'll do it again at the end, but just name some of the places people can get more information on this group, and give us some more names of prominent front groups, please.
Absolutely. So there will be Bible Vaccine Center.
That's yours. Bible Vaccine Center.
.org? I'm working .com.
Okay.
Although I do own the .org as well. BibleVaccineCenter.com. I'm working with a group of other people, a pastor from South Korea. His name is Pastor Yang. We did a series actually of the history of the Korean cults. Very thorough, very helpful. And then there's also closerlookinitiative.com/SEJ, where me and my friend, we went through the entire doctrine of SEJ and refuted everything, and the history and the psychology as well. So for people who are looking for like a deeper dive, highly recommend that. And of course, there's a shout out to the subreddit r/Shincheonji, one of my favorite places on the internet.
So just to be clear, you're one of the facilitators on the Reddit for Shincheonji?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm one of the facilitators, and it's a dynamic group. It's a subreddit. So,
right.
There's a lot of great information on there. And there's a lot of people who are hurt, who are processing emotions, who are processing anger and frustration. And it's like a way of like all the ex-members and people who are interested to talk to each other. Yeah. I met people from Germany, Korea, all over the world, primarily through the subreddit.
Right. That's great. Back when I got out, there was no internet.
That must have been hard.
There was not a lot of us speaking out against the Moonies. I had one friend, Alan Tate Wood, who was public. But later, after I became a whistleblower for the congressional investigation into the Korean CIA's activities in the U.S., I started an ex-member group called Ex-Members Against Moon. Later, I called it Ex-Moon Inc., and I edited a newsletter. And the media knew a central, and the public knew a central place they could come if they had information on the Moonies, or I could do interviews and such. But back then, most members were afraid to speak out. There was not a lot of us willing to stick our neck out and go, I'm going to tell it how it is,
And that's the advantage.
Come after me. Ha, 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 ha.
That's definitely the advantage of the subreddit, is that at least you're pseudonymly anonymous. Now, if you say a lot like, hey, I'm from Orange County, blah, 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 okay, people are probably going to figure out who you are.
Right.
But the advantage of the subreddit, that's why for ex-cult members, I mean, there's bigger ones, XJW, XMO, Ex-Agustin Cristo. That's another very concerning cult. And they're all, a lot of former members are on this public forum, releasing information, releasing documents,
right,
while being safe.
Yeah, I've done a few Ask Me Anythings on Reddit, but
nice.
For me, I like talking more than I like typing, but I discovered I can dictate now, and it's pretty accurate. So it's less egregious for me to sit there and be typing answers out. I can just talk it and then edit it and then copy and paste it into to Reddit. So I'm potentially available for Q&As for your subreddit and such. So you got involved. Tell us more. I remember you saying you were not sleeping much, you were losing weight, you were constantly trying to proselytize and get people in. Tell us more about your daily life where you were in.
Absolutely. So when you join, you sign what they call the Book of Life, and the Book of Life for them would be the church registry. And then you pass over, meaning you graduate into the cult. You are love bombed. So in the Seattle branch that I'm from, we would connect to the Los Angeles temple because they had a couple thousand members there. And you would have your name, photo, face, everything on the on a projector screen saying, look at this first fruit. He passed over. He has special knowledge. And even though I was systematically lied to, and even though there's my true self and my cult self, at that time, my cult self overrode my true self.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fully convinced this is the place of truth. And I recall the day that I passed over, I accidentally let something slip. This is the day that I joined a Korean cult. And one of the leaders said, Chris Hunjenim, because we would be called brother, sister, Hunjenim, stuff like that. How dare you say that? You should be grateful. So it was very fascinating reading your book, looking back now, and being like, oh, that's one of my slip-ups.
Yeah, your unconscious called it a cult. That's fascinating.
So as I continued, I was very passionate. And I recall Seattle's around 30, 40 people at the time, the branch.
Mm-hmm.
And I recall I was recruiting all the time. I got some events where I got rooms full of people who I would try to recruit into the Bible study. And actually, I tried to recruit my mom and dad. My dad, the only thing he asked for was a statement of faith and the name of the religion. And because we were unable to produce that, he said, hey, Chris, I respect you. No, thank you. And just walked away. And then over time, as I continued recruiting, I was sitting in as a spy for some of these Bible study classes. And during this time, there would be people who would come up to me and say, Chris, I think this is a cult and something feels off, and they would leave. And they would ask me questions like, why is it that they're so secretive? And actually, one of the more effective people who helped me wake up were my agnostic atheist roommates, not the Christian apologists, although they do have their time and place.
Mm-hmm.
But in that moment, my agnostic atheists for pointing out things that I didn't realize. At the time, I was driving at least an hour to the temple in Seattle, which was tucked away in a hidden, unmarked building. And they would ask me, Chris, why are you so secretive about your beliefs? Chris, you're not getting much sleep. My roommate's wife just said point blank, you've been getting sick a lot. You lost a lot of weight. I actually had my roommates and my coworkers telling me the same thing. Chris, you're losing a lot of weight. Did you notice? I'm like, no, I didn't. I was at around maybe 110 to 130 pounds at the time.
What's normal for you?
150 to 160.
Yeah, I lost a lot of weight in the Moonies too, by the way. I just had a physical today. I was 175, but I remember 155, and that was without the 7-day fasts. When I was fasting 7 days in the Moonies, just water and working full days, I went down even more.
And that's horrible because it does damage to your body.
Yep, it really does. But the sleep deprivation is the worst. I was sleeping 3 to 4 hours a night.
Same with me. I remember getting 3 to 4 hours of sleep each night. Some of the leaders had car accidents. Sometimes they scraped their cars. Yep.
Guilty. Almost died.
Yeah.
Due sleep deprivation.
That was actually a very common theme. They're like, where there are a few moments of just like, oh, I almost crashed into so-and-so after, a very late night training of multiple weeks or months.
Right.
And so as time continued, what happened was, you mentioned COVID. In 2020, we accidentally spread COVID. Accidentally in the sense that we're recruiting. But then in Korea, we're secretive. And then, so if someone were to go up to you and try to ask you a questionnaire to recruit you, you wouldn't know if they're Shincheonji. To make matters worse, we had the mindset that being sick was not an excuse to miss service.
Right.
Sound familiar?
Yeah, and they packed them in one location, so one person could be a super spreader to everyone else in the congregation.
And that's exactly what happened. So during this time, they were shouting at the top of their lungs, "Amen, hallelujah." And, you're packed like sardines in this enclosed space, and, it happened in Daegu. And then the super spreader event happened. And for the first time in a while, we were on the front page news globally. A Korean church spread COVID. And my own roommates who knew nothing about Shincheonji at the time asked me, Chris, did you hear about that church? I'm like, what do you mean? I had to do a poker face because wisdom of hiding. And so during that time, ironically, I had the most normal amount of sleep because we went down to going to service instead of 7 days a week, recruiting and doing events all the time, getting 4 hours of sleep. We reduced it down to twice a week. And I was able to rest and catch up on sleep. So I got a taste of normalcy.
Mm-hmm.
But then in 2020, fall, we started recruiting again 7 days a week, this time online through Instagram. I still have my old Instagram account, Grace and Peace Blogspot. And it says we're a group of Christians in Seattle trying to spread the word. Remember hey, Steve, how do we view Christians again? Right.
Well, the Moonies said basically that we were the only God-centered church on earth, and everyone else was controlled by Satan.
What?
So it was a black and white, all or nothing, good versus evil, and we're gonna unify Christianity by basically recruiting everyone to us and getting rid of everyone else.
Right. And so to speed up my story, though, is what happened. And in 2020, I started dating another member. I had 3 rounds of interviews with leadership, all telling me I shouldn't do it, but I had the choice to do so. I had a 6-month process of I could only marry this girl in 6 months. And
this was a member of the group, I assume. You were not allowed to have a girlfriend outside of the group.
Exactly.
Okay, go on.
And so because of that, that was the moment when I started doubting. Because remember the original girl who got me in, they told me to kind of get over it, suck it up. We don't want to get in interfere with relationship type of stuff. Then here they are, in 2020, end of 2020, beginning of 2021, interfering with relationship type of stuff.
Right.
I was like, what the heck, So I started researching. I found papers. University of Pretoria did a detailed academic paper on the history of Man Hee. Turns out that he was at least involved with 3 different cults before starting his own cult. The first one he joined is Olive Tree by a guy named Park Tae-sun. So it turns out Park Tae-sun and Moon have the same teacher, Chung Duk-sun. And she taught the bloodline corruption. Sin entered through Eve having sex with the devil in the Garden of Eden.
Yes, the devil had a penis, and he was horny.
He was a very horny guy.
He had sex with Eve, and she seduced Adam, and that's how we fell into Satan's dominion.
Yep.
And in the Moonies, it was like, we need Moon and his perfect wife to purify us and adopt us into his holy family so we could have sinless children that are free of Satan. The only problem is his own kids were into cocaine and prostitution. The so-called Messiah was having babies out of wedlock with other females in the group, and other things have come out. But as a member, those were all satanic, accusations.
Yes. Anything that's critical of the group is eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And it's interesting too, because when you look at the lineage of these Korean cults, Park Tae-sun, same mentor as Moon, and then that's Olive Tree. In Shincheonji theology, that's where the eschatology framework really began, where revelation would be fulfilled before the leader passes away. The one overcomes the 144,000 in great multitude in white. A lot of the core principles found in Shincheonji can be found in this group. Then there's the Tabernacle Temple. This group was a doomsday cult that predicted the world was supposed to end in 1969. Clearly, we're still around. World didn't end. But they taught about how the Bible's this giant metaphor. You need this secret decoder ring in order to have the correct interpretation.
Right.
Then there's a third doomsday cult. One of the leaders from the Tabernacle Temple started his own cult. Said the world was supposed to end in March 13th of 1980. It didn't end. So the next day, Man Hee and one of his friends decided to join their own cult, or start their own cult. And that's how Shincheonji was formed. So SCJ says they started in 1984, but there are court records that show it really began in 1980, March 14th.
Yeah, that's interesting. So for people who may be listening to this, who've had experience in the group, but are still clinging to the hope or the belief or the dream that there'd been all of those years of Bible studies are really helping them have a unique spiritual experience with God. What do you say to somebody who's a sincere, seeker and believer?
Well, a lot of your interpretation of the Bible, for example, is based off of what Man Hee says. But there's other Korean cults that also make what I call the parable or metaphorical hermeneutic plus the leader. So the World Mission Society Church of God, they say that, for example, the hidden manna of Revelation is really the Passover that was hidden away and needed to be restored by their leader. Shincheonji says the hidden manna is the revealed word, according to their leader. So because both are using the same hermeneutic in the sense of making the Bible a parable, which one is right? And how can you prove it?
Yeah, I've interviewed former members of the World Mission Society Church of God, and I'm going to do another interview with someone else. But yeah, so did you have any spiritual experiences in the group that made you believe that this was the right place?
Absolutely. I actually had an interesting dream that when I was joining this group, it was as though I was covered in a giant cloud. And I remember someone calling out to me saying, "You will forget my name." And I remember having this emotional experience, and I woke up, I forgot the name. In the group, I couldn't understand what it meant, but I rationalized with myself. Oh, well, maybe it's because this is the place I need to be. Maybe I'm leaving the confusion of Christianity into this.
Mm-hmm.
But then looking back on it, I realized, well, I forgot my true self. I was
Interesting.
being controlled by this entity, this mind controlled Chris, Other moments were just feeling the eureka of I have the secrets of the kingdom of heaven. And then there's the cult self that, genuinely enjoyed those moments of, I finally found my Bible nerds. I finally found people who understood me for who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And in a weird way, there's some nuggets of truth. You do meet some friends in these cults that, in a weird sense. However,
well, they're friends if they want to be with you after you leave.
Right.
Otherwise,
exactly.
you're an enemy.
It's a very conditional framework, right? It's like if they were truly interested in being your friend, then, like you said, it wouldn't have so many conditions and if-else statements.
Right. Exactly. And you recently went to Korea to meet people, including the former number 2 man of Shincheonji. Tell us about Pastor Shin.
Yeah, so when I got the privilege to interview him, and I've interviewed him in the past through actually another Steve, cool name, I guess, And when we were asking him questions, we asked them more along the lines this time for a more secular audience of like, okay, so why did he leave? One of the things that he was talking about was that he saw the corruption, the misuse of funds, and also how Man Hee, he allegedly had inappropriate relationships with some of the long-term female members.
I mean, sexual relationships.
Exactly. So I believe her name is Hisuk, and she actually had public interviews. This is on YouTube. I believe she allegedly had a 7-year relationship with Man Hee.
And the members thought he was celibate or he had a wife or what?
So Man Hee actually has a wife.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the man, the promised pastor of the New Testament, the one overcomes, the white horse who Jesus rides on of Revelation 19. Even though he himself is not Jesus, he is the messenger or essentially prophet who represents Jesus. So how could this man have such relations? So they call him the number 2 man. They call him Snake Shin. And even I heard about Snake Shin in Shincheonji when I was a member. And he confronted Man Hee about this. And according to Pastor Shin, he was thrown out eventually. Another interesting thing too.
Before you go on, I just want to comment about Snake Shin. Members like to call ex-members, particularly former leaders, mean names. Do you want to know what Moon called me to the members? Because Moon held me up to the members as the model member that everyone should model. You want to take a guess what Moon called me?
Snake Hassan? I'm just going to take a guess. No?
No, he called me the negative Messiah. He said I was leading people straight to hell.
Yeah.
That's what this is from a former leader who was in the meeting with Moon when I was discussed because I was going on TV and stuff. The negative Messiah.
Man, I'm not surprised that they do this because they're afraid. They are afraid of anyone who has the spine and courage to publicly say, you were wrong and you are wrong. Right. You know what's interesting? With Shincheonji, they had a lot of books, including, I mentioned that Shintan book from 1985.
Yeah.
So when Pastor Shin left, or was actually kicked out, they claimed that he allegedly embezzled money, which is kind of ironic because Man Hee was found guilty of embezzling money in 2020. Nothing ironic about that.
In the courts? He was actually found guilty.
Yep. This is during the COVID expectation, and now he's actually being investigated for political influence in Korea, which is a big illegal thing. And that's a whole other thing that's currently being reviewed in court right now.
Well, my former cult leader's wife, Hak Jahan, because he died in 2012,
Right.
is under authority of bribing political leaders. And they were shut down in Japan, completely dissolved because of their corruption.
Yeah, right now, both of our cults are under the same investigation. Former cults, right? Good clutch. And right now, there's I believe they're investigating for tax evasion, bribery, and I believe also voting block, allegedly.
So voting block is very important concept, actually, because in the United States, we used to have a guideline that pastors should not talk politics from the pulpit because people will vote the way the pastor tells them to. And that was called the Johnson Amendment, and that was pushed to the side. And so in the US, we have millions of people who are doing what they're told by their prophet or their apostle in these mega churches, and thinking that anyone opposite the GOP or Trump are devils and traffickers.
And that's sad, because I definitely agree there should be separation of church and state.
Yeah,
I definitely agree with that, because I can see, now on record, not every Trump supporter is, in a cult, of course. But I'll say this, there are a lot of concerning things that are happening as well. And so right now in Korea, Man Hee is under that investigation. And it's just we'll see what happens.
But he's elderly, isn't he?
Yeah, he's at least 95, last I checked.
So what's going to happen when he dies, do you think?
So there's a lot of parallels between Shincheonji, the Unification Church, and the Jehovah's Witnesses.
The Moonies.
Moonies. And what will probably happen is they'll say the spirit working through flesh, which I think SEJ stole from the Unification Church through their Shintan doctrine.
Right.
And that Man Hee will work through the flesh of someone else.
Right.
And there'll be a big splintering. It's just very fascinating, because when you look at the history of the Korean cults, you really do see the repeating pattern over and over and over again. I mean, Jesus Morning Star, another Korean cult, came out from the Moonies.
Yep, exactly. Another perpetrator of women.
Unfortunately.
So, I interrupted you with Pastor Shin. You were going to say something else. Do you remember what else? You were going on to another point, but I wanted to comment on Snake Shin and just how they demonize anyone who actually knows what's going on and who is shining a light. So
unfortunately, with what happened is all the books from 2006 and earlier were more or less deemed heretical.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because Pastor Shin was pointing out the contradictions between today's doctrines and the previous doctrines. Actually, I have more of their English books, like The Best Explanation of the Parables, Physical Fulfillment of Revelation, and The Creation of Heaven and Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And on my multiple blog spots and websites and YouTube videos, whatever, I pointed out a lot of the contradictions and prophecy failures.
Right.
That Shintan book, the 144,000 and the completion of the new heavens and new earth, was supposed to happen in 1987.
Oops.
Whoops.
Yeah.
We're still around.
So I just want to point out that this was a pattern, especially with the older American cults like the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons, where they had a doctrine, they wrote it all down, and then over time they changed the doctrine and then lied and said, we never taught that. But the only problem was when the internet came around, people had the actual documents, they scanned them and put them online and went, you're lying to us. And it has caused so many millions of people to leave.
I call it the gaslighting algorithm. So when you point out a new doctrine change, Shincheonji has an equivalent new light doctrine of Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, I call Shincheonji the Korean version of the Jehovah's Witnesses for a reason.
Uh-huh.
Faithful my servant, the new light, and the precipice of Armageddon coming around the corner. That what they'll say is, well, Chris, you misunderstood about the prophecy failure. Then what they're going to do is they'll state their new doctrine as if it was always taught that way. And then they'll normally try to say, this is why you shouldn't listen to the persecutors or slanderers, or you should retake center. Now, center is that 6 to 12 month Bible study where you reprogram yourself. And I recall I went through it at least a few times. The final time when I was starting to wake up, I started highlighting a lot of the changes from my center class in 2018 to the 2021 center class. And already I could see that the doctrines were already changing in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, so it's a clue. But I just interviewed a woman who was in a wellness multi-level marketing cult, and we talked about sunk cost fallacy, which is the idea that when you invest a lot of your behavior, your time, your money in something, and then things are changing and they're not panning out to be what you were told they were going to pan out, there's a desire to just keep doing more and hope, wishful think that somehow magically the group's going to become good. And what they promise is actually going to happen, except it doesn't work that way in reality.
Like there's this thing, like a book, When Prophecy Fails.
Yes, Festinger's book. Yep.
Yeah, I got to see it in real time because to explain the context, Shincheonji splits the world into 12 different regions, 12 tribes. What was supposed to happen is the 12,000 priests were supposed to be selected. Then after this, the Great Tribulation begins. What happened in reality is COVID-19 was called the Great Tribulation, which is kind of ironic because Man Hee calls that the devil's deed and Satan's work, but the Great Tribulation was caused by God, so he's calling God the devil, technically, blasphemy against the Holy Spirit.
That's a little contradiction, huh?
Yeah, minor details. This is a guy who's in touch with God, Jesus in the heavens, but he called God's work. Anyways, and on top of that, we still don't know who the 144,000 are today, but the Great Tribulation and the winds blowing started in 2020. That's a really big contradiction that I got to witness. So now they say they apply the gaslighting algorithm.
Yeah.
And then they say, no, you misunderstood. We now have greater clarity, food at the proper time. There's this new light. Jehovah's Witnesses listening, let's please, I beg you, review Shincheonji. And for the Shincheonji members, review Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, and the JWs, every time they would prophesy the end of the world and it didn't happen, they said, well, there's new light. So that's what Chris is alluding to with that terminology and such. But for my listeners, you identify as a Christian, as a believing Christian. So, but you've got a full-time job. You're still a tech nerd and using your engineer degrees, etc. But this is a passion of yours to want to help people.
Yeah,
and you're helping people around the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting. 5 years ago, even with you, I remember reading your book, watching some of your interviews. There's a TED Talk around 2021 or 2022. You talked about how do you know if you're brainwashed? Yep, that's a great one because one of the people from Korea who I just interviewed, she said that video caused her to realize, oh my goodness, why does your recruiting story sound so familiar to my recruiting story? I thought we're the special sauce of the Korea and all that, you know?
Yep.
And it's been fascinating to see how many doors have been opened just by speaking out.
Yep. The truth will set you free, right? And people should not be afraid to question if they have, if they really want to follow the God and the Bible. They shouldn't worry about a human being, doing the voodoo stuff.
I know.
Don't listen to Snake Shin. It's like, why not? Why don't I listen to him and decide for myself if what he says makes sense and if he has proof of what he's saying? And Didn't he actually write some of the books and some of
Yeah,
the doctrines?
he corrected Lee Man Hee's doctrines. He actually was one of the founding foundations of the Bible study curriculum. He copied that from another Korean cult, funny enough. He did that a lot. And even with HWPL, that was copied from the Moonies. We are doing the peace work and etc. And it's fascinating because when I looked at the Moonies, the bigger, far more successful Korean cult, I realized just how insignificant Shincheonji is.
Mm-hmm.
With a caveat, HWPL was recently promoted by the Martin Luther King Jr.'s, one of their descendants, and I believe it's the King Center in Atlanta. And that was
HWPL is what?
It's a front group organization, a peace front group for
Of
Shincheonji.
Shincheonji. And what's it stand for? Do you remember?
Yeah, so it is Heavenly Culture, World Peace, Restoration of Light. And the leader is coincidentally Lee Man Hee. And they're trying to gain more political power. Sound familiar?
Yeah, so there's a Russian cult called Alatra that has Pastor Mark Burns leading that. He's an African-American pastor, Trump's personal. He officiated over the 22-foot golden statue of Donald Trump, and he started out by saying, "This is not a golden calf," which was boo-boo. But anyway, all these cult groups that are supporting the cult of Trump have been indoctrinated to think that God is using Trump. Yeah, he's a bully. Yes, he's sinful, but so is King Cyrus, and God has a bigger plan.
Right.
But at a certain point, you got to go, wasn't he recruited by Russia as an asset? Wasn't he having sex with underage girls? Wasn't he defrauding the U.S. government? At a certain point, no matter how much you believe in your pastor and stuff, it starts leaking through and people start having doubts. And that's why I keep encouraging people who have family members, friends, coworkers who are still clinging to the belief in Donald Trump and MAGA to have a conversation, be warm, just ask, well, what do you think of what's happening in Iran? Or what do you think, the future is? Or what do you think crypto is God's plan? Or whatever. You can ask all kinds of questions. But to your comment about not everyone's in the cult of Trump, I agree. A lot of people just vote Republican without thinking twice about it. But I say at this point in 2026, if you actually believe that Trump won the 2020 election, or you actually believe that January 6th was not a violent coup attempt, if you believe that those two things are what Trump says they were, then you are in a cult of Trump, in my professional opinion.
And not only that, but there are also, the mayor of Irvine a few years ago said, "Oh, I'm all in on the HWPL projects." And then allegedly, and maybe ask your friend when you interviewed WMSCOG, there's an alleged person who's in the WMSCOG church, and she's influential among Trump as well.
Yeah, so there are many cults in the cult of Trump: Scientology, Krishnas, Falun Gong. They have the Epoch Times, Opus Dei, and there's a long list of groups. And the Moonies I have on freedomofmind.com a list, 71 pages, single spaced, of front groups of the Moonies, 71 pages, single spaced. And we stopped keeping score of the front groups about 5-6 years ago. It was actually a former private investigator colleague that was doing putting the list together, Larry Ziliaks, which I'm very grateful to him. But what I want to say is legitimate religious groups are confident to tell people up front who they are, what they believe, and what to expect if you get involved with their congregation. And they don't try to split up families, and they don't tell you to break up from your primary relationships or cut off your family or drop out of school or take all of your trust fund and donate it to the group. They want you to sleep. They want you to eat. They want you to question.
Not only that, but for any of these cults, why would God be afraid of Google.com or a large language model or Reddit? My group's actually scared of Reddit, which I think is hilarious. And it's like you're telling me that the God of the heavens and the earth can't handle, some nerd from Seattle and some other people from all over the world posting a few things on a subreddit? Really?
Well,
Come
it's
on.
information control
Right.
and phobia indoctrination to make people afraid of looking at facts.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's like, why don't we think about if we really believe in God and if we want to accept the Garden of Eden story as a parable or as a story? Almighty God, beyond space and time, didn't brainwash Adam and Eve to be obedient. He didn't use coercion on them. There was a choice there. And I think that says something profound about the need for following through faith and not through brainwashing.
Right. And this is the beauty. Okay, so for my personal experience, I'm in Seattle. Seattle is known for not really being Christian or whatever. And the thing is this. I have my faith and my worldview challenged every day. I still go to a Reformed Baptist church, which many would consider to be conservative.
Mm-hmm.
But with that said, we're confronted every single day with, people of different opinions.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've learned to be an effective communication style as well is to hear the other person, try to understand their perspective, and then maybe even question my own worldview too. And then with that said, then I can respond in a more loving way. And I found that to be a more effective way of communicating why I believe and what I believe. Because a lot of my friends, again, are not really always going to be Christian. Some of them are, some of them aren't.
Right.
And I find that to be more healthy because I'm not afraid of listening to Alex O'Connor. Shincheonji, their members are afraid of listening to me or Pastor Ezra or anyone else who speaks out against Shincheonji.
Right. Or an ex-Mooney.
Oh, yeah. I know, right? Like,
what are you afraid of? I was in a different group altogether.
Fun fact, I recall there's a person who made the bite model comparison in Unification Church. The first comment was a Shincheonji member being like, "Why are you persecuting?" That person then immediately responded saying, "I'm talking about the Unification Church.
Mm-hmm.
You should be convicted by this for the fact that you missed the point."
Mm-hmm.
I hope that member left.
So the bottom line is that I feel that because brainwashing doesn't erase your conscience, doesn't erase your core authentic self, that there'll always be doubts and dissonance. And the issue is if you feel safe and you feel secure in your own relationship with the divine, it will strengthen your faith to be exposed to people of different religions and different perspectives. I love to learn. I read Karen Armstrong's The History of God.
That's
cool. You haven't read that book, it's worth reading because it goes way before Judaism to what the pre-beliefs in God were. And you have a context, the historical context of the evolution of people's belief in something greater than themselves.
Absolutely.
And my faith includes science. My faith includes outer space. My God is out there too. It's not just on Earth, and it's not a man with a beard floating in the clouds. You know?
And it's just like, I'll add this in and all that stuff, and you can always edit it out, whatever you feel comfortable. One of the biggest appeals of Christianity for me, compared to Shincheonji, is that God entered creation entered a state of humiliation and ultimately died for me. Versus the God of Shincheonji is this monster from outside who never cared, never wanted to directly interact with his people, and just said, if you don't do exactly what I tell you to do, I will cut you off and you'll be a betrayer and throw you to hell. And to me, that is the beauty of Christianity compared to Shincheonji. And I'm not a subject matter expert of all other religions. Don't get me wrong. But
Well,
to
you're
me,
young.
that contrast,
You
know,
can learn.
Thank you. Oh, I definitely am. It's fun.
Yeah,
I love this.
But
know?
I encourage you to be a Christian. My work is not to change people's religious orientations or faith. It's just to add the psychological neuroscience, and I want people to sleep 7 to 9 hours if they're in a relationship or even working in a company and they're not allowed to sleep properly. It's going to affect their immune system. They're not going to be thinking clearly. They won't be as productive. And I think people should have a personal life too. It shouldn't. They shouldn't be living their job and pretending not. And I'm also like old enough to say I'm not a fan of having chatbots be in my life as opposed to real life people that I can hug and I can look in their eyes and I can hang out and do dancing and
That is something that I genuinely fear is the LLMs and the AI psychosis that we are already seeing cases of.
Yes.
That will be the next wave of cults.
They're already, and Jeffrey Hinton, who won a Nobel Prize and left Google, he said they're going to be creating cults with using AI, and they are.
Yeah.
And you can have tell an LLM, make me a cult with this variation and that variation, and give me an ideology of this and that, so I can, have people endless sex and make a lot of money, and it will generate a business plan. It's like that, and make me a biological weapon or any number of other misuses of power. It's just frightening.
I mean, right now, a lot of the companies aren't really doing the proper security checks. And right now, we're just trying to pump out money and power and influence. And we can already see the narcissism, the same playbook right now. So then going back to Shincheonji, of course, I mean, I say this for the people who are listening, Shincheonji is not unique. The Unification Church, read Combating Cult Mind Control, research Unification Church, research World Mission Society, Church of God, Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, the JWs think that Jesus returned invisibly, in 1914 and then 1919. The Shincheonji, they believe Jesus began the work of fulfilling revelation in spirit in 1966.
Right.
Does that not sound familiar?
Yeah. Good point. So just for my listeners, you've heard me say this over and over again. I didn't join the Unification Church as a Jew, and the Moonies love to be called the Unification Church because they don't use it anymore. They have other front groups that they use. So they want people to be on the alert of the Unification Church, but be on the alert for the World Family Federation for Peace and Unification and about 100 other front groups. The key is asking, who is the founder? Dig deep. And if you go to a website that's going to give you a Bible study, before you do any studying, look to see, do they say who is the founder? What do they believe? If they don't have a statement of what they believe and what they want and who they are, go somewhere else, because there's a lot of legitimate scholars and religious people like Chris who will be happy to share their faith with you. And, I really believe we have a mind and we should use it so that we can make good decisions. Final words are yours, my friend. This has flown by.
I know. Great conversation. Definitely a lot to talk about. I think, like you just said, don't be afraid to Google. My dad, all he did was ask a very simple question. Do you have a statement of faith? That's it. And since they couldn't produce one, he's like, all right, no thanks.
Right. But I would coach your father to follow up with my son, Chris. A legitimate church should have a statement of faith. Did you ask your leader? How come we don't have a written document explaining upfront what we believe? So that's where families don't know that they can ask questions and, and help their loved one instead of just saying, no, thank you. I'm not going to join your group. Where there's smoke, there's fire. You said that at the beginning of the interview. If a group's legitimate, it will stand up to scrutiny. So and if you have a family or friend that's like, hey, come to this Bible study, don't say sure, say, tell me more. Is there a website? Who's the founder? Did they go to seminary? Do they know scripture? Do they, were they in a cult before? Of course, they won't
Only
tell you.
3, but
they won't tell you. They won't tell you, but you have to ask. If you ask and then they lie, then you can call them on the lie when you find out the facts. But if you don't ask, then it's easy to gaslight you and say, well, I never said that. And it's like, no, I asked you here. Where is it? So love is stronger than mind control. I'm so glad you got free. Your friends helped you reality test. I'm proud that my work was able to help you. And I'm very excited to share my learnings with you because I'm not getting any younger and I want to pass on my knowledge of what works and what doesn't work. And in addition to my books, I do a podcast, which are going to be on and live streams and have a course. And I want to do more courses that actually give people tools to reality test. And I think there's going to be many millions of people leaving these false prophets and apostles in the United States and around the world when they realize these people claim that God is speaking through them. But if God is telling them Trump is his agent, like you should really question that one. Look at Trump. He's not a King Cyrus figure. Very dark person. That's my own opinion. Thank you, Chris Vishoot. We'll be in touch.
Thank you. And I'll talk to you later.
Okay, great.